Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. It's your DFS review video for the 2021 3M Open. Sorry this is coming out a little bit later than usual, but it was my birthday weekend this last weekend and I really didn't have any time to prepare for a video on Sunday or even record one. So here we are on a Monday night. And I never want to skip any of these review videos because I want you guys to see how the process works, you know, what went well, what didn't, and how we can improve. But I also want these for next year's preview videos so we can look back on them and see what went right and obviously apply all the things we learned in this review video. So yeah, that's why we're doing it. If you want to see what I'll cover in this video, I do have timestamps in the description below. They can also be found on YouTube's progress bar by hovering over them. So if you do want to skip around, they're at your disposal. But let's go ahead and start this thing. Let's get into it. I'm going to start here with the DK page. Usually I like to go to the results page and talk about the top 10 this way, but I might as well just give you a bunch of information that you can process at the same time. This gives you the DK points that were scored. It also gives you the ownership percentage of the contest that I played, which this one is the $5 GPP, the big one, the Drive the Green. But I also give you rounds 1 through 4 scoring. So it gives you the whole picture of who finished inside the top 10. And I only want to talk about the top 10. I know I have, 11th through 16th place on here, but we're only going to talk about the top 10 in this first segment and then move on from there. So your winner, Cameron Champ. This is his third PGA Tour victory, and now it marks a victory of each of his first 3 seasons, which puts him in very elite company. Dustin Johnson has done it. Tiger Woods has done it. And I think 4 other people, I can't remember their names, of being the only ones to have done it. So it's a very short list. And obviously we have the GOAT and we have former number 1 golfer. I think he's former number 1 in Dustin Johnson. Now, is Cameron Champ an elite golfer? No, not yet. I think he's far from being an elite golfer, but he does have elite raw skill. He just flicks his wrist and the ball goes 340 yards. You can't teach that. And he doesn't have to hulk up like Bryson DeChambeau does in order to hit it that far. He just has that natural athleticism that just launches the ball. I mean, if he can work on shaping his shots, working on a short game where he can escape, basically any type of lie, any type of scenario, then I can put him in that elite company. But as of right now, I think the best comparison, which I think some of you guys might laugh at after what I just said, but it's Dustin Johnson. When DJ first came on tour, he had that raw skill as well. You wouldn't put him into an elite golfer, but it's like, man, the guy can hit the ball super far, and he can score at will sometimes. I feel like that's Cameron Champ. He did give us some signs leading into this tournament that he was poised to do well. And by the way, this was a huge community win because a lot of people were on Cameron Champ. A lot of outright winners, a lot of DK winners, actually playing DFS lineups with Cameron Champ in it. But there was some coach speak that kind of went with this. Cameron Champ said that he's in the best headspace that he's ever been in, as well as playing the best golf he's ever played in his PGA Tour career. Now, again, like I said, that's coach speak in a way where it's good to hear. If you do like him, then it's like, okay, I can take that, with a grain of salt, or I can take that for what it's worth, or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, it propelled him to a victory. And for all you guys that did play a large amount of them, congratulations. I set my exposures to 10%. You can see I was overweight compared to the $5 GPP, which makes me feel good because obviously it feels like I knew something than most of the majority of the contest, or even I don't even know what you want to call it. I don't want to call it the DFS world or anything like that, but whoever was in this contest, the public. I can't say the same about Louis Oosthuizen. I was on him 10% while the public was on him 15% of the time. I just, the narrative of having a hangover was kind of in my mind. He just finished his second major championship in a row where he was leading going into Sunday and squandered the lead. So I just felt like that's just a negative like headspace to be in. But obviously Louis didn't see it that way. And I was also concerned Louis was going to withdraw. You know, he is known to withdraw, and this is the 3M Open. It's not even that big of a deal. Like, I didn't think it would be that big of a deal for Louis, but he obviously finished strong, finished second place, all 6 rounds in the 60s. And this time around, he didn't lose a lead. He was very much in contention for a lead. He shot a 66 on Sunday, so a very strong finish for Louis this time around. I'm not going to talk about the rest of the guys, you know, not player by player, but some surprises that come to mind. Ryan Armour and Brian Stewart, those are golfers I was not on. You know, you can see 1% and 2% respectively. I just didn't. There really isn't anything that points to either of those two guys doing well at something like this. Now, let me flip that in a way. There was a conversation that TPC Louisiana was a good comparison to this, which I think Brian Stewart has won, and Ryan Armour does play well at. You know, when I look at, like, that would be a Bermuda course though, TPC Louisiana. This is a bent grass, and you can see neither one of them has the greatest bent grass stats, but obviously, you know, they do finish inside the top 10. Brian Stewart has 67 bent grass events, while Ryan Armour has 37, and they have a 5% and 7% clip of finishing inside the top 10. That's good enough for me. Like, I usually avoid players who have below 5%. Which obviously you just saw those guys did not, or they're above that 5% threshold, 5% and above. But either way, those were 2 surprises for me. I'll tell you one golfer who isn't a surprise to me, and that's KH Lee, as was Adam Hadwin. We talked about both of those golfers during the strategy video, and maybe in the preview, I can't really remember, but I know when we're talking about buckets, these 2 golfers, when they came up, I thought they were good plays. And I also thought Keith Mitchell was a good play. You can see I have them like 6 and 5% across the board. That's not super high ownership, but it is overweight compared to the $5 GPP. I felt good. Like, Hadwin has a bunch of good bucket scores. I don't know, you know, like the 3M Open has had winners like Matthew Wolff. Michael Thompson isn't a long hitter, but Tony Finau was in the top 3 of that situation, as was obviously Matthew Wolff had won. They're long ball hitters. So I thought, you know, long ball was the way to go. And that's why I didn't think Adam Hadwin was going to play well here. But the buckets in themselves they're supposed to dispel any bias that you have. Play the golfers that, you know, have good bucket scores. So that's why Adam Hadwin for me popped. But so did Mitchell, so did Vegas, and so did Schwartzel. I liked all 3 of these golfers. We talked about them in the strategy video. There was a route that we could have gotten to find these golfers and put them in our lineups pretty easily. Now, I didn't have the greatest week, but I still made back a decent amount of money. And I mean, you can see a lot of my exposure levels were right there. Let's see. I would like to talk more about on this page. Before we get any further into it, I do want to go over the GPP winning lineup versus the optimal lineup. And I think what I want to do is probably hide some of this. I'm going to hide these columns here. I don't think we really need to talk about that. But I want to show you the optimal lineup, the $5 GPP winning lineup, and the realistic optimal lineup that you see in columns R, S, and T. The $5 GPP winning lineup consists of the golfers that you see in this light blue color that I have highlighted up here, which is Cameron Champ, Johnny Vegas, Louis Oosthuizen, Kyung-Hoon Lee, or KH Lee, Adam Hadwin, and Tony Finau. So they used $50,000 of their salary. They scored 604 points. And that included, that consisted of a 10K golfer, actually 2 10K golfers, an 8K golfer, 2 7s, and a 6. That's wrong. I am so sorry. It's still 2 10K golfers, Louis and Finau, 2 7K golfers, 3 7K golfers, and a 6K golfer. So that's a really unique and interesting way to build a lineup. Usually you don't really see 2 10K golfers paired together because it doesn't really give you a lot of leeway in building lineups. But obviously this guy put together the right golfers in order to take this $5 GPP winning, or this $5 GPP down. The optimal lineup consists of all the golfers you see here with the black tick marks: Cameron Champ, Johnny Vegas, Louis Oosthuizen, Charles Schwartzel, Keith Mitchell, and KH Lee. It used up 47,100. And it scored 647 points. So it was 43 points over that $5 GPP winning lineup. But you know me, I don't like to leave a lot of money on the table. I think it's kind of foolish in ways. It leads to way more permutations of lineups that can be built. I would rather get it closer to 50,000. The closer you can get to 50,000, the better. My rule is anything above 49,000 or 49,000 above. That's okay to me. That's a realistic optimal lineup. So what I like to do is build a lineup, the most optimal lineup that's over $49,000. And this week, what it ends up being are the 6 golfers that you see in the top 5. So that's Cameron Champ, Johnny Vegas, Louis Oosthuizen, Charles Schwartzel, Keith Mitchell. But it includes a golfer here in 16th place, obviously because he scored a decent amount of points. And that's Cameron Tringali. Now, I usually like to, with the sweet spot process, include everybody inside the top 10, but I can't. There's just no way, no viable way to get anything close to 50,000 because everyone is in that low 7, high 6K range. And that's just not going to get us close to 50,000. So I did have to jump down to the 16th place, which, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, is kind of disappointing. Like, I don't want to get that far down there. But obviously I have to for this week. That realistic optimal lineup scored 635 points. So it's only 12 points behind the optimal lineup. And 31 points better than that $5 GPP winning lineup. So it works well. And we'll talk about these golfers when we look at the DK page, just to see, with the buckets, can we get there? Or could we have gotten there picking these golfers? But yeah, that's your $5 GPP winning lineup versus the optimal lineup. The guy did really well. He had 5 golfers inside the top 10 and really 5 golfers inside the top 6. But obviously we want as many golfers inside the top 10 as we possibly can. He still won this thing though, with one of his golfers finishing 28th place. And he could have selected anybody, but obviously he played Tony Finau, which was a good choice. Like, he could have played Patrick Reed. Yeah, he was cheaper, $400 cheaper. So he could have left $400 on the table and scored 2.5 more points. But there's no reason to nitpick. He won the $5 GPP. I think that's $50,000 that he took home, or $30,000 he took home. That's a good win. So either way, that is your optimal lineup versus GPP winning lineup. Let's go ahead and get back into the DK page. And I'm going to just start with the sweet spot rank. So the sweet spot rank takes into consideration the SweetSpot Score and ranks them accordingly to what the best score is. So Dustin Johnson was my number 1 golfer with this rank. When we look at the top 20 golfers of my sweet spot rank, I want to find more top 10s and top 20 finishes than I see missed cuts. Your missed cuts are the 85s. The 90s are withdraws and DQs. So I'm including that in the mix. And when we count this, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 missed cuts. On the flip side of that, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This golfer that you can't see down here, Snedeker, inside the top 20, as is Maverick McNeely. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 golfers inside the top 20, and really only 2 golfers inside the top 10. Now, those golfers inside the top 10 end up being on the optimal lineup, so that's a good consolation, but there are more missed cuts than there are top 10s, top 20s, so that's disappointing in my eyes. Like, that's kind of a failure. It all goes down to what constitutes with that score, which obviously I talk about in the strategy video. It's looking at the stats that I have on the screen right now. If you want to know what it is, obviously go back and take a look. But just take my word for it. Obviously for this tournament, I need to think of different stats to look at. Like I said, consolation, 2 of the golfers are inside the optimal lineup, inside the top 20. But just outside the top 20 is Johnny Vegas, and he was also in the regular optimal lineup. So again, another consolation. And I have 4 golfers up here inside the top 22 that were in the realistic optimal lineup. So again, it's a great consolation. In many ways, it does make me feel better because we're obviously trying to find the optimal lineup. And when we can narrow down a player pool that much, like honestly, if we're looking at the top the top 22 golfers, or even like say the top 25 golfers in my sweet spot rank, and I'm telling you to pick 4, those are really good odds. You know, you don't have to fish that much for different lineup builds or anything like that. You can make several lineups that are pretty decent just looking at these top 25 golfers. And hopefully you're on Louis Oosthuizen, Cameron Tringale, Charles Schwartzel, Johnny Vegas. You know, hopefully you're on guys like that. But it wouldn't hurt so much to be on a Brandt Snedeker or Maverick McNeely. Like obviously they weren't in the optimal lineup, but they're okay replacements. So anyways, yeah, sweet spot score I thought was okay. Now with that sweet spot score, what I like to do is find our marquee tee time pairings. If 3 golfers in the pairing has a sweet spot rank, you know, cumulatively, so all 3 of them under 100, then I colored them with this dark green color. So what I'm going to do is go ahead, sort by game, and then just filter out all of the pairings that aren't a part of the marquee tee time pairings. So here we go. Here are our groups. Now, I sent out a tweet. I also said this in the strategy video. Every single week since I started doing this, we have found at least 2 of our optimal lineup golfers in these marquee tee time pairings. We didn't this week. We just found 1. And that's Louis Oosthuizen, which is deeply disappointing. I kind of was concerned about saying that, you know, making it known. I'm not a huge believer in karma or superstition or anything like that, but you know, when you say something like that, it just, for whatever reason, ends up being it doesn't work the next time around. So that's kind of what happened here. I also kind of take into account the strength of field. This was like the 3rd weakest field that we've had in the last 3 months. Now the other 2 fields, they followed suit, and you did have 2 optimal lineups in the marquee tee time pairings, but unfortunately we didn't this time. Like we had 2 of our golfers that were in the GPP, the winning GPP lineup, which is great. And really we could have had 2 substitutes in Pat Perez or Gary Woodland that would have done okay. You know, Woodland scored 90 points, and Pat Perez scored 83.5. That's not terrible, you know. But yeah, unfortunately, our marquee tee times did not produce 2 optimal lineup golfers. So that was unfortunate. I guess I don't have anything else to talk about when it comes to the marquee tee time pairings. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for us, and that's unfortunate. I guess if we scroll through this, can we see anything else that kind of steps out or that pops out? Oh, here we go. Okay. So group 13, game 13. We had 2 of our optimal lineup golfers. Now, this is 2 weeks in a row this has happened. I remember this happening at the Open Championship, where we had 2 of our golfers in the same group. We had the winner, and we had another guy who finished inside the top 10. So that's pretty remarkable. Now, KH Lee, Cameron Champ, and Jason Duffner, perhaps there should be a reason why, or not so much a reason why, but maybe they need to be ranked better, and we got to find better stats to do that. But that's an interesting group. Looks like Perez and Woodland were paired together, and they finished well. We obviously know that with the marquee tee time pairing. Here's another one. It'd be Charles Howell III, Ryan Armour, and Jimmy Walker. We had 2 top 20 finishes, one sixth place. 6th place finish. Jeez, can't talk. So that was good. We talked a lot about CH3. We liked him. Obviously, we can like his playing partners too, if that's the case, because you never know which group is going to pop. Scrolling down a little bit, I guess Snedeker, Reeve, and Austin Cook would have been a group to look at. Obviously, we only wanted Snedeker and Reeve, but hey, that's another group that did well playing together. So obviously, super limited. Didn't really turn out as well as I wanted it to, but that's okay. One thing I always forget to do is look at morning waves versus PM waves. Obviously, we talk about the weather during the previews. So let's take a look at how many AMs versus PMs we see inside the top 10. And obviously, I'm going to mark the PMs right here. The AMs are in this column. There are way more AMs than we had PMs. And by the way, I did mention this in the preview video. Because I thought thunderstorms were going to come through midday on Friday and was going to delay some of the play. With that, there were going to be wetter conditions, which provides more control for these PGA Tour players. And when a storm comes through, usually that quiets the wind. I'm not sure if a storm came through, but that was what was forecasted. And seeing all of the AM golfers do well gives me some belief, that what I thought somewhat came to fruition. The wind either died, a storm doesn't have to go through. My big thing with what I thought when a storm was coming through is it was going to make the course easier afterwards. So if the weather, got nicer, if the wind kind of calmed, quieted down, that's probably what lent itself to the AM PM wave being the better wave. So like I said, I rarely do this, but I just remembered it. So obviously I wanted to share it with you guys. Let's go ahead and get into the buckets. So when we look at the summary here, actually I have a filter on this that's a little bit different. What we ended up talking about was we looked at top 5 frequencies. And usually when we look at our anchor buckets, we just filter out all the zeros and talk about all of those that, have 1 or more for minimums in the top 5. Obviously we have 2 years of data and that's what it goes back on. But what I ended up doing was I looked at my projections, who I thought was going to show up inside the top 10 or even inside the top 5. So I removed this and I just took projections that were greater or equal to 1. And kind of went and talked about a lot of these during the strategy. So a lot of this was kind of our marquee. Well, not marquee, our anchor buckets. So we start with last week, and we're looking at 1, 2, 3, and 4. Obviously, the top 5 frequencies are good with those. So the first thing I want to do is, when we think of last week 1s, or here, let's do this. I am going to actually remove everybody except for our top 20 golfers. I want you to see what the top 20 looks like. So actually, let's remove the 16th. We'll keep 11 just because. No, we'll remove 11. So we're just looking at top 10. We want to find last week 1s. We want to find last week 2s and 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. Obviously, we have our 1s here. We have 1, 2, 3 2s, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 3s, but we have no 4, no last week 4. And when we look at the summary, I want to point out something. Last week 3, I've been tracking this now for 3 weeks. I'm including the strength of field and how many points each bucket provides that strength of field. So obviously, each stat category that I cover, obviously last week is one of those stat categories. It has 6 buckets. Those 6 buckets are going to have 100% of the strength of field points. So it's not like last week contributes to X amount of strength of field points, but then recent form 2 equals X amount as well. And all of these stat categories and their buckets lead to the strength of field. That's not how it goes. Obviously, last week and recent form are separate from each other. So when we only look at the last week buckets, that's all we're focusing on is just the last week bucket. So last week bucket 3, what I'm getting at is last week bucket 4 probably wasn't inside the top 10 because it didn't make up many of the strength of field points. In fact, it only made up 1.81% of the strength of field points when it comes to last week buckets. So I briefly mentioned something like this where I didn't really find a lot of confidence in this bucket. You know, there are 11 golfers in it this year, and only 4 of them are quote unquote quality golfers when it comes to the official World Golf Ranking. So I can see why that bucket would not have done well. And obviously we don't see 4s. Now, when I expand this to the top 16, we actually get a number 4 here in Ches Reavie. He's the first one, and he did finish in 11th place. So he was 1 place out of the top 10. So if you want to find a consolation in that and say, okay, yeah, sure, we saw a 4. The other thing I could tell you is we only see 1 score outside of 4, and that would be a 5 with Charles Schwartzel. There are no 6s, and obviously we just have the 1 5. Obviously, you can also see Cameron Tringali here being another 5, and then Bryce Garnett down here being a 6, Roger Sloan being a 5. But we don't see them inside the top 10 or even inside the top 5. So for me, yeah, the last week buckets, they were a pretty good success. And like I said, strength of field was not good. I need to incorporate more of that strength of field into my projections, which I don't currently do. When it comes to the other 2 buckets that, you know, are kind of our anchor buckets, would be the recent form buckets. Recent form bucket 1 and recent form bucket 2. So when we come to this and we look at our 1s and 2s, I mean, Cameron Champ is 1, Hadwin is another, so is KH Lee. And then from there, we have 3 golfers that finish inside the top 10 in Ryan Armour, Mito Pereira, and Brian Stewart as our recent form 2s. So we had 3 and 3 respectively. You know, I'm projecting 4, but like I said, the projections, they need to include the strength of field buckets, and maybe that drops it down a little bit. But either way, I would say the bucket system, just looking at those buckets, obviously I told you about salary and strokes gain. I really don't like to go over those because usually we don't have enough stats to normalize the statistics to analyze. So I never really like to look at it, but we can take a look. You know, salaries, our number 1 bucket is a 7K range. Number 2 bucket's the upper 6K range. So when we take a look, what do we see? We do have a bunch of 7K golfers inside the top 10. Yeah, a bunch. And then we do have 2 upper 6K range. So even when it comes to salary buckets, that worked out well. And strokes gain 2s, I don't think that one did. No, strokes gain 2 bucket, I don't know why that one shows up as much. Like, it shows up a lot when I go through this, and I really don't think it makes that much sense. I will say this, strength of field, pretty low. 9.95% of the strength of field goes towards that. That's not great. So to me, there's kind of like this, I think there's a union that needs to happen between strength of field and how many golfers are in that bucket. So obviously 6.79 when it comes to upper 6K range, not good. But when we have 37 golfers, maybe that's the threshold. The threshold's somewhere north of 20. Because obviously strokes gain 2, we had 18 golfers, and 10% of our strength of field points went towards that bucket, which is pretty decent. And maybe, actually I shouldn't say that. So when we're comparing these 2 buckets, what's the difference? And to me, it's obviously the amount of golfers that are in that bucket. It's nearly double. It's more than double. So I think that has something to do with it. I think that combined with strength of field. So the more I analyze this, I think the better we're going to get in trying to figure out who we should play. One thing that I was actually toying around with earlier today is just looking at top 20 finishes. So obviously I have top 5 frequencies, but I also have top 20 frequencies and cut made frequencies. I would just take out zeros, and take a look. Okay, I have minimums of at least 1 inside the top 20 for each of these buckets, and then try to see how well they performed. Because obviously what we see here, I'm just going to point out all the 6s and 5s. that show up inside the top 10. I want to know why they show up here. They're not part of the anchor buckets that we talked about. Maybe we can get a better glimpse of the top 20 market or the top 20 results for these buckets to get on some of those guys. So, I mean, we can take a look at last year 5s and 6s. Actually, the last year bucket is a bucket we really didn't talk about, and I don't know why it's even showing up. Oh, never mind. It's the last week bucket. So, Charles Schwartzel was the last week 5. And obviously, he's the golfer that kind of stuck out as last week 5s. Yeah, I guess Cameron Tringali, I don't see last year 6 except for Bryce. So, I mean, 4 total golfers that were 5s and 6s. We don't see 6s up here anyways, so, I mean, that works out. You know, last week 6 wasn't a good one. Last week 5, you know, still looking at strength of field, not very high. You know, maybe that's why we saw only one golfer finish inside the top 10 and top 20. But I was kind of toying around with this, trying to figure out, you know, is this where I want to go? Because it does include, it actually includes 2 more buckets between last week and recent form. And obviously, those are the only 2 main buckets we're looking at. I do have salaries and strokes gained, but like I said, it's hard to normalize the data. Usually, I mean, DraftKings goes back to 2017 when it did a full season of DraftKings. I think 2016 was just majors. So going back to 2017, we do have salaries, but that's when it started. So it's not like we can really normalize any of the data. And plus, I mean, salaries aren't a contributor to someone's success, I don't think. Like, your DFS, your PGA Tour players aren't looking at their DraftKings salaries and getting motivated from it. It's just DraftKings' way of basically ranking, you know, the best golfers in the field to them, and obviously applying the price tag to show that. So salaries aren't a huge thing, but I still like to analyze it because, again, it kind of goes off of that. And we can always look at the strength of field that gets provided for each of those buckets and make our minds, or, you know, make sound decisions off of that. So anyways, yeah, the other buckets, last week 5, we see one inside the top 10. And recent form 5, do we see that inside the top 10? We sure do. Keith Mitchell. So maybe we expand it to top 20s and just take a look. Just look at it, because I don't think it's healthy to analyze top 20 when we're trying to find the optimal lineup, which includes all 6 golfers inside the top 10. Maybe it's a good place that's our cushion, like that's our max. And it's noteworthy that some of these buckets might show up inside the top 10. So I'm toying around with that idea. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section. But as for anchor buckets, they all worked out. So I think the process this week was great, especially when I'm looking at Marquee Tea Time pairings. That failed. Let's put it that way. That failed. Anchor buckets, that was a success. And I can't remember everything that we tipped. Oh, this is where we talk about your stat leaders in this field. Your top 20 stat leaders in this field, just to see how they did when it comes to the results. So let's go ahead and take a look at all the top stat leaders for each of the important stats that I covered in the preview. Well, I just want to go through all of this just to see if we can find some correlation. So when we sort from best bent grass to worse, we're looking at the top 20 golfers of this stat. Mito Pereira did well. He only has 2 events under his belt, so it's hard to say that's something we need to really look at. But when we look at top 10s versus missed cuts and stuff like that, we see way more missed cuts than we do top 10s or top 20s. So bent grass, not really the stat, at least not the results we're looking for when it comes to the grass stats. when we look at your top 10 bent percent, or really your success rate of finishing inside the top 10 on bent grass, this also shows, like, it doesn't give us a lot of top 10s or top 20s. It gives us a lot of miscuts. So there's something weird with that. And when we look at 2021 bent grass, usually this is where we see a lot of success. Now, we do have 3 optimal lineup golfers. We also have 4 of the GPP winning lineups, or golfers in that lineup. And then we have 3 of the realistic optimal lineups. So 2021, like when we're just looking at short-term bent grass success, it actually is a pretty decent stat to go by. So I think that's one thing we just continue doing. We look at our short-term grass stats, weigh that a little bit more than our overall bent grass or just overall grass stats, because of these top 20 golfers for this stat, only one of them is in the optimal lineup. Whereas we saw 3 of them in that 2021 bent grass stat. And yeah, that's good enough. So anyways, bent grass, probably not getting a lot of our answers there. Obviously, we talk about recent form when it comes to the bucket system. So there's nothing really in the recent form section that I really want to talk about. If we look at our strokes gain stats, let's go ahead, look tee to green, sort from top to bottom. Yeah, we have 2 of our optimal lineup golfers, almost 3. Charles Schwartzel comes in 22nd place. That's pretty good. I was looking at the top 10s, top 20s, and I was like, that's not what we're looking for. But when we do see 3 of our optimal lineup golfers, that's pretty good. So tee to green, pretty good. Off the tee, we have 3 of our optimal lineup golfers right up there inside the top 7. So you had Vegas, Cameron Champ, and Keith Mitchell all in the optimal lineup, and also in the realistic optimal lineup too. And it's really just those 3 inside the top 20. So off the tee, pretty good. How about approach? 1 guy in the optimal, 2 guys in the realistic optimal, and that's it. And not a lot of top 10s or top 20s. So approach, not really the stat you want to go by. Around the green, I have 2 guys in the optimal lineup. You can barely see KH Lee down here. So weird that around the green performed better than approach. I wouldn't really go by that. Like, I wouldn't put a lot of I wouldn't invest a lot into that. So that's how I feel about that. Putting, 2 of our golfers inside the realistic optimal lineup are here. 1 guy inside the optimal. It just shows putting stats are hard to gauge. One thing that I've been doing, so I've always had this, the recent form versus baseline. It's just showing season long versus last 7 weeks, how well they've been performing. It's just a simple sum function of, kind of minusing stats from recent form against the baseline. And anything that's positive means they're playing better in the last 7 weeks than their baseline. Anything negative means worse. I tried creating a new stat, and what it consists of, this actually is a whole different formula, but I want to take account putting and approach and put them together, because putting, I should say, good approach stats really affect putting strongly, and vice versa. Bad approach stats make putting stats usually look really good. And I'll get into that with a different video. I'll save it, but I want to add these 2 because anything that's positive, I want to see how well that does inside the top 10. Now, where I've seen this work in different weeks, it doesn't really work here. Although I do have 3 golfers inside the realistic optimal and 2 inside the optimal, it's not nearly as much as I want to see. And if I sort this by finishing position, you can see how some of these stats look also. Keith Mitchell and Cameron Champ are in the negative when it comes to the stats. So, like, where I would want to see all these guys positive, we see them negative, and negative by a large amount. So that doesn't make me feel all that comfortable. But this is still a work in progress, and I just want to see what it looks like going forward. I'll go through these extra stats really quickly. Driving distance, obviously Cam Champ, we know he hits the ball a long ways. 3 guys inside the top 20 for optimal lineups. So that's pretty cool. Driving accuracy, not terrible, but no optimal lineup golfers up here. Good drive percentage. Same applies. So accuracy here, as much as we thought it mattered, we don't find any of our optimal lineup golfers. We do see a lot of top 10s, top 20s. I'm not going to take anything away from that, but we also see a lot of missed cuts. So good driving accuracy, not really what we're looking for. Green and regulation, that also provides 0 optimal lineup golfers, which is insane. Proximity, again, 0 optimal lineup golfers, so proximity is not a very good stat. Bogey avoidance, just 1. 1 guy with the optimal, 2 that come with the realistic optimal. Birdie or better. This is usually a stat that shows up a lot. And I guess we do have number 1 and number 2 in the results here. Vegas is actually our 21st ranked golfer and Champ is our 20th. So we can include top 21, and really we have 3 of our realistic optimal lineups there. These other stats I don't think is necessarily to go through. This is just, I think this is our make percentage between 3 to 5 feet. So, I mean, 2 of our optimal lineup golfers, not terrible. Our make percentage between 5 to 10 feet. Oosthuizen's up there, but no one else. 10 to 15 feet. Oosthuizen again and no one else. The putting stats, not really that impressive. 1 putt percentage. Nope. Pump up from 5 feet, 5 to 10 feet, no. 10 to 15 feet, not really. So putting was not a stat to go by. But those are all your top 20 stats. And really, I don't think I have anything else that I want to talk about. I don't think there's anything that is worth going over. Yeah. Stat leaders in the field, top 20 for each. We already went through that. I will provide some Olympics content. I think it's just going to be tomorrow. Just going to be a strategy / preview video. So that means I'm not doing a preview video, but I'm also not going to do a review video for that one. It's a one-off event that happens every 4 years. I'm not going to get caught up in trying to be an expert when it comes to the Olympics. So I'll go through a full DK page, but we're not going to talk about buckets. We're not going to talk about optimal lineups when it comes to the Olympics. We'll just look for some value, and I'll put a rank together. I'll put all the tee times together. Maybe we can find an edge in grabbing some of the guys that are playing together to see, that might actually play well together. So we'll go over that. It'll probably still be a decent length video. You know me, I can't not have a long video, so look forward to that tomorrow, and it'll probably be a late one. Lineup block for that is Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, so it would be 6:30 Eastern Time. But yeah, again, look forward to that. But that is going to conclude this video, so hopefully you guys did well. I made a decent amount of money back. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in that Olympics video tomorrow. All right, bye.